Kia ora koutou. Morena councillors, staff, could I declare the council meeting for Wednesday the 14th of May open? Doing so, can I remind councillors, staff, this meeting's been live streamed, recorded. Recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Council website at the conclusion of the meeting. Could I further remind you all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the course of this meeting that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and found to be slanderous. With those comments, Councillor White, could you open with a karakia, please?
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. Koutou mā te meme o te committee nei. Kei noi tātou. He honore he korore ki te atua he maunga rongo ki tamato te whenua whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa ane. Hanga e te atua he ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā o mātou. Whakatongi o tō wairua tapu hei a whina hei toho toia mātou whiti kāro, whiti kōrero. I rungi te kaupapa nui mui a tātou I tēnei rā. I karai te koto mātou kai whakaola. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, Councillor White. Apologies. We have apologies from Councillor McDonald and Councillor Thompson. I'll move. Councillor Von Duddleston second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. There is no public forum. There are no items to be added to the agenda. No change to the order of business. Declarations of conflict of interest. I don't believe there are any. Thank you. Public excluded be transferred into the open. There is none. Brings us to item 8.1. Decision required submissions on fees and charges. Mr. Taylor, oh, sorry. Byron and Alicia.
Chair and councillors, the report you have in front of you essentially outlines the council's latest draft fees and charges policy, and that includes the Resource Management Act, Building Act, and charges and changes to bylaw charges that was made available for public consultation together with a proposal between March and April this year. The paper also presents 5 submissions received from the public and is included in attachment 1. None of the submitters wish to present their views in person today. The submissions were analysed by staff, and the content for this analysis, along with staff comment and key themes identified, are outlined in attachment 2. The report seeks Council's direction on recommendations 2A and E set out on pages 9 and 10 of the report. The report recommendations are within the fees and charges budget set for the 25-26 annual plan and is consistent with the revenue and financing policy for the relevant activities. Following Council's direction on those submissions today, staff will then prepare the policy in line with that direction for adoption at Council's next meeting in June. Activity group managers for the relevant activities and submissions in the report are available today if Council has any questions on those topics.
Thank you, Kumaran. So Councillors' reports open for discussion. I'll start, Kumaran. Just 2 questions in terms of the financial burden. There's a theme appearing that our charges relative to other regional councils would appear to be high. If you've got a comment on that. And the second one is the last paragraph on the financial burden raises the issue about increasing consent deposit fees. That is essentially just a cash flow problem or an issue because the applicant pays the true cost anyway, don't they?
The response to the first question is the basis for the fees and charges is cost recovery. So staff have looked at the cost to deliver particular services and ascertain the cost for that service. And that is the basis for the fee, for setting the fees and for consulting with the community on that. In relation to the deposit, that is correct. It's the revision to the deposit is to try and reduce the quantum of payment at the end of the final payment process to reduce that difference for the payee.
So it doesn't really answer the question though, in terms of our fees and charges, where some of the submitters here are saying that we are at the higher end of those fees and charges relative to our other regional councils. Do we have a feel to where we sit in that league table? mean, as long as you're comparing apples with apples, and I don't know the answer to that.
So that analysis,
Mr. Fraser.
Good morning, everybody. This is something that gets talked about at the consent manager group through to Eri Kahika very, very often. As you say, Mr. Chairman, it's quite difficult to compare directly. The sorts of activities that trigger resource consents, of course, are different in this region. The considerations that the plans say that we must consider through those processes are different. Our cultural landscape is different. Having said that, and I haven't looked at the data for a little while, my understanding is we're reasonably on par with the other regional councils across the country, but happy to come back with some more detail on that if that would be useful.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Councillors. Councillor Winters.
Oh, just the submission from Ngāti Awa on water bottling in Otakere, Mr. Chairman. They're asking a lot from us in terms of their submission. So I'm just wondering how we're going to handle, I know some of the things we can't do because of laws, but how are we going to handle their submission in terms of some of their requests? And that's a big answer, but are we going to do a draft back to us to approve, or does it just get done by staff? Because they don't want to present to us in a formal hearing, but I think they want some answers from us.
Thanks, Councillor Winters. So our Lieutenant, our consent manager, meets monthly with Bev from Ngāti Awa and talks about these sorts of things quite frequently. In fact, that might be one of the reasons for the submission. And so I think those conversations carry on, and we will formally respond to the specific points that they've raised from a staff level.
Councillor Shirley.
Can we see a copy of what the written response to Ngāti Awa? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was also particularly interested in this topic, and on page 18, I draw colleagues' attention to some words there which are extraordinarily profound. And it reads, Trona, the Ngāti Awa Treaty Settlement Entity, remains concerned that the Crown continues to assume a decision-making role for fresh water and presumes to delegate authority to decision-making to regional councils, which issues water rights to consent applications when those rights have never been ceded by Māori to the Crown or to Council. So this is not an assertion of ownership that's under debate with the various tribunal hearings. This is not recognising the Crown. This is totally separate sovereignty, and therefore, how can they recognise us? And they virtually say they don't. So what power have we got to consider their application? But it's worse than that. They themselves are a creature of statute. They have been set up by the Crown. So they're actually denying their own existence. This is extraordinarily profound. And in that paper I put round to colleagues recently, it was one of the outlines I highlighted, which is a constitutional issue at a very high level that we are all facing at a national level, but we in the Bay of Plenty are right in the middle of this, because they're not alone. Other treaty settlements too, they set up on a co-governance model, but they are morphing into a separate sovereignty model. And this makes very interesting territory. So that's just extraordinarily profound. If they don't recognise us and we have no authority, why are they applying to us for resources and support and regulatory systems? And moreover, if it's not done through the Crown and the statutory bodies like regional councils, how do you regulate water? How do you ensure compliance? How do you enforce it? Do you have a parallel police force? The issues just go on and on and on. So we can't run away from this issue. That's a direct challenge to our existence and the Crown's existence.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. So I pose the question, do you want a response to that, or is it a statement that we collectively should be concerned about? Because some of those issues are outside our mandate to be a decision maker. We have to operate under the existing statute that we operate under. but I'm prepared to let the chief executive have a response to that if you'd like.
I think it is the latter.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like it or not, we're part of that debate. We are in the meat and the mustard in that sandwich. We're at the cutting edge of it. And it's not going to go away. So, you know, whatever your thoughts are about it, we should openly discuss it and work through it.
Just before I come to Councillor Eatey and Councillor Nees, Ruben, this Aurovita consent, how long has this been in process? Because it's got to be 10 years.
My memory, Mr. Chairman, is that they lodged that application in 2017. We granted consent in 2018. And since that time, it's been working its way through the various levels of court. We had a Supreme Court hearing in, I want to say November 23. And we're in the position of waiting for a decision from that court with no indication that I'm aware of possible timeframe.
So that's the Supreme Court in 23, and we're now in 25. Thank you. Councillor Eatey.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Some feedback. I was actually going to talk about the, as Councillor Winters brought up, the submission from Ngāti Awa. Yeah, there are some substantial things to get back to them on. I was just wondering around, they did mention some mechanisms as to how we could, around fees and charges to the bottling plants. And as they draw more water, as to whether or not we can charge them more for that particular activity. And so I'd be interested in knowing what mechanisms we can apply, and if we can't apply them, why, in terms of a legal, you know, what binds us in terms of that. So I'll put a pin on that and maybe wait until you come back, but I thought I'd just inject that in there as part of that conversation. Coming to Councillor Shirley's concerns, which are profound in many ways, and are which is something also that has been around as far as I've been walking around on this planet. As far as I'm concerned, it's this is the nuance, the context, and the complexity that we operate in. As far as I'm concerned, there's no escaping that complexity. If you look at it rather as a symptom, in my view, Councillor Shirley, of the, I guess, constitutional arrangement that we have, that would be my advice. I don't think it's going anywhere particularly soon. So, and there's possibly a lot of it above our pay grade with regards to the remit of the work that we have ahead of us. But what I do find profound is the fact that today, such a valuable resource as artisan water in our own backyard can be bottled and shipped overseas for nothing. So I'm wondering, Councillor Shirley, why that isn't more profound, because we certainly could be paying for health, education, infrastructure, if we were able to find a way to navigate a way forward between Māori Indigenous rights, because I believe that's the big hurdle that this country has been unable to get over with regards to finding a way to charge a royalty for our water. So I know when the consent went through, there was concern from this council, which was voiced, I think, from the majority of the councillors, that we did not have the legislative tools to charge a royalty for our water, which globally is absolutely, unrefutably identified as a taonga and of a huge value. So that's what I would say that I find incredibly profound.
Thank you, Councillor Eatey. I'll ask Mr. Fraser to respond, but essentially the answer to your question is we're bound by the statutes and the regulations we operate under, which is no matter what the usage, we don't charge or can't charge for water. But there's been recent High Court decisions, I think it was in the Hawke's Bay, where there was an application to transfer a consent from one particular usage to another. So it was some form of industrial use to bottling that was declined by the court.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. In Christchurch, I think a wall scouring facility looked to change a consent for a water take for that purpose to bottling, and that has been challenged at various levels and found, if my memory is correct, to be an incorrect use of that chain variation process. I think if I could just respond very briefly to Councillor Easy, like the chairman says, we are bound by the tools that we have. Those tools haven't changed since the consent went through in 2018. And my suspicion is that that's one of the things that the Supreme Court is battling with. And I think one of the roles of that court is, and when the decision does come out, I hope there will be some useful commentary in that for us as society to try and tackle or get over some of those hurdles, perhaps.
Councillor Neese.
Oh, thank you. The scope of what Ngāti Awa cover is much, much wider than we are considering today. And I guess the nub of it is on page, summarised on page 14, which are their points with regard to the fees and charges. And I believe that what they're proposing is would require some sort of consultation with the rest of the public. If we can't really consider these because they have implications for other people. So my position is, while I hear what Ngāti Awa feel and there are real issues, I think the staff have made the right decision not to pick up on those requests, because I think we would have to deal with them in a different way, perhaps through a long-term plan or something like that, because they would need some sort of consultation, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Neese. Anything else, councillors? Councillor Scott.
Along those lines, my understanding, if we are, well, I think we're bound, aren't we, by a cost recovery policy, and that is probably the answer to several of their submissions, if I've read it right.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Scott. So I think Kamaran will correct me if I get this wrong, but through the revenue and financing policy, we set percentages of various parts of the council's costs, and I think some of the things that Ngāti Awa are asking for, we already do, particularly in terms of science and investigation, monitoring, etc. So there is some flexibility there for you. I do completely agree with what Councillor Neese says. That would need a whole separate process to go through to change any of those levers.
Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation. It's far better to have incremental increases than wait for 5 or 10 years and then have a substantial one. The people that would require these services need certainty, and the revenue and financing policy gives guidance to look ahead, and these are based on actual charges, because if they're not recovered, guess who pays? Everybody else.
Prepared to move, Councillor Crosby. Thank you, Councillor Winters.
Second, Mr. Chairman, but I just wonder that 2B, recovery of actual reasonable costs for fast tracking, should we just have one or the other? Should it be the actual costs of work on fast track?
The legislation, Councillor Winters, says that the costs have to be both actual and reasonable for us to be able to recover them.
Okay, councillors, the resolution on page 9 has been moved and seconded.
Yep.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. I'll move, we go into public excluded.